On Christmas Eve, in the middle of Tokyo, three homeless strangers find a baby in the trash. No police to intervene, no government agency appears, no moral authority steps in. Instead, the people's society has already thrown away, decide to care. Tokyo Godfathers looks like a holiday story about redemption, but underneath it's something much more radical. It's a film about morality and about who gets to define it. Because Tokyo Godfathers isn't really about Christmas miracles, it's about what happens when the people society throws away are the only ones willing to care. On the surface, the film looks like a Christmas fable, full of miracles, but underneath the charm is a political inversion. The film quietly asks a dangerous question. What does it mean when the only people willing to protect life are the ones society has already deemed worthless? In a city built on productivity, efficiency and image, the ethical center of the story belongs to three people who have been economically and socially discarded. From the beginning, the film constructs a sharp contrast between spectacle and invisibility. Tokyo functions smoothly. Weddings proceed on schedule, trains run, stores glitter. The city appears orderly and prosperous. But beneath the surface lies another world, one of shelters, abandoned buildings, and makeshift communities under bridges. Jin is an alcoholic, weighted down by shame and failure. Miyuki is a runaway who stabbed her father and fled her home. Hana is a trans woman estranged from her biological family, surviving on the margins while dreaming of motherhood. These are not characters society treats with dignity. They are treated as excess, inconvenient, unproductive, disposable. Yet, when the baby appears, they are the only ones who respond. The film does something radical here. It normalizes their care. There is no dramatic speech declaring their virtue, no swelling cue that signals moral triumph. They argue, they complain, they hesitate, but they stay. Hana insists the baby deserves warmth. Jin resists, but ultimately continues the search. Miyuki grumbles, but follows. The choice to care is not framed as heroic, it is framed as obvious. That simplicity is politically charged. In many moral narratives, ethical action is tied to social status or authority. Doctors, police officers, or institutions intervene. Here, the state is almost entirely absent. Responsibility does not emerge from law or bureaucracy. It emerges from relationship. And that shift challenges a deeply embedded assumption in modern societies, that moral order flows downward from institutions rather than outward from human bonds. Hana becomes the emotional gravity of the film. At first, she appears flamboyant and comedic, larger than life in her reactions, but gradually it becomes clear that she possesses the strongest moral clarity of anyone in the story. She names the baby, she cradles her constantly, she demands that Jin and Miyuki think beyond convenience. When Jin suggests taking the baby to the police and moving on, Hana resists, not because she rejects institutions outright, but because she understands the wound of abandonment. She has lived it, and she refuses to reproduce it. There is a pattern that quietly runs through the film. The characters who have been abandoned are at the least willing to abandon someone else. Jin once walked away from his own family out of pride and shame. Miyuki ran from a home where she felt unseen. Hana was rejected by her biological family and forced to create a life on the margins. Each carries a history of rupture, and yet, confronted with radical vulnerability, they choose persistence over retreat. Care becomes not a sentimental impulse, but an act of resistance against repetition. They will not allow the cycle to continue. As the trio searches for the baby's parents, the film presents us with different versions of family, and none of them fit the idealized image of stability. Miyuki's father is emotionally distant, unable to reconcile authority with intimacy. Jin's family collapsed under economic strain and personal shame. The baby's biological parents are trapped in debt and desperation. Every respectable household we encounter is fractured in some way. And yet, the most consistent and functional family in the film is this improvised trio under a bridge. They fight constantly, they expose each other's weaknesses, they dredge up past mistakes, but when crisis strikes, they regroup. When Hana collapses in the cold, the others carry her. When Miyuki is kidnapped, Jin risks himself to save her. They do not dissolve under pressure, they persist. The film suggests that family is not secured by blood or legality. It is secured by the willingness to remain present when things become difficult. This is where the film begins to gesture towards something larger than personal redemption. In a different voice, Carol Gilligan argues that dominant moral frameworks tend to prioritize autonomy, rules, and abstract justice. But she describes another moral language, one centered on care, relationship, and responsibility. That language does not ask what is the correct universal principle. It asks, how do we respond to the person in front of us? Tokyo Godfathers operates almost entirely in that second language. The baby is never treated as a philosophical dilemma or a procedural problem. She is not a symbol of legal obligation. She is a bond, and bonds demand presence. The trio's journey is not about calculating the most efficient solution, it is about refusing to detach. That refusal matters. Modern urban life often prizes independence and productivity. Those who cannot sustain themselves economically are framed as burdens. The homeless are described as problems to be managed or removed from view. The film quietly challenges that framing. It suggests that the people most aware of dependency are often the most capable of ethical action. The trio understands it because they lived it. Their marginalization does not make them morally deficient. If anything, it sharpens their responsiveness. Care, in this film, is not weakness, it is strength. It stabilizes characters who might otherwise collapse into isolation. Jin begins to confront his past not because he is forced to by law, but because caring for the baby reawakens his sense of responsibility. Miyuki softens enough to reconnect with her father because she has witnessed what staying looks like. Hana finds dignity not through social approval, but through the act of mothering itself. Care does not erase their flaws, it gives them coherence. By placing the moral center of the narrative in the hands of the socially discarded, the film performs a subtle political inversion. It implies that moral authority does not belong exclusively to those with status, wealth, or institutional power. It belongs to those willing to respond when someone is in need. In a society structured around efficiency, this is a disruptive claim. It suggests that ethical life cannot be reduced to systems and procedures. It must be sustained through relationships. The coincidences that conclude the film, the reunions, the near miraculous timing, feel whimsical on the surface. But the deeper resolution is not magical, it is relational. Families reconnect not because a law compels them, but because someone chose to remain present long enough for repair to become possible. The miracle is not destiny, it is persistence. By the end of Tokyo Godfathers, the baby is returned, apologies are offered, and the city continues to glow as brightly as before. Yet, something fundamental has shifted. We have seen that the people labeled as failures were the only ones who consistently protected life. In a world that discards what it cannot neatly categorize or profit from, the most radical act may be the simplest one, refusing to let someone be thrown away. The film leaves us with an unsettling implication. If the safest place for the most vulnerable life in the city is in the arms of the homeless, then the problem is not with those on the margins. The problem lies in a social order that confuses productivity with worth. Tokyo Godfathers does not preach this message loudly. It whispers it through actions, through staying, through care. And in doing so, it suggests that morality does not begin with grand principles on institutional authority. It begins with the courage to respond to another person, especially when no one else will.